Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Play, Pause, Rewind, our first episode of 2024, episode 78. We are approaching the 3-year anniversary of our show. At the end of January, I think, is when our first episode got recorded. So we're almost 3 years old. Hooray. But Niles, how have you been since before the holidays, I guess, was when we recorded our last episode?
I know it's been a hot second since we've been on here, but yeah, it was our first of the 2024, and 2023 closed out on a good note, I would say. It was a fucking crazy ass year, but you know, it was good, all things considered, I would say. And you know, I love the holiday break, you know, that time between, you know, December 23rd and the 2nd of January. It's always a nebulous zone where nothing gets done. You don't know what day it is. You're just drunk all the time and hanging out with people, and you're like, I don't care about anything. And it was a great time just to spend with family. Yeah. But what about you, Dylan? How have you been since our last episode?
Oh, mostly pretty good. Drove to and from Texas, saw some family and some Austin friends, and we did New Year's Eve with some of our friends and hung out with a bunch of people. But you know, you're right. That time between Christmas and New Year's is always dumb and nothing gets done, and it begs the question, why are we working? Why are we not just off?
Yeah, right?
Like, maybe these should be holidays too, but doing all right overall. Saw lots of movies and watched a bunch of TV as well, so we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the show. But yes, as always, we are talking about a film or a TV show. In this case, a film. We'll do a couple minutes, non-spoilers, and then we'll dive into spoilers. This week, we are talking about Saltburn and written... Yes, Saltburn. Written and directed by Emerald Fennell, starring Barry Keoghan, Jacob Elordi, Rosamund Pike, Richard E. Grant, Archie Maddock, Allison Oliver, and Carey Mulligan. Saltburn follows Oxford University student Oliver Quick as he is invited to spend the summer at the estate of his wealthy and popular classmate Felix and his eccentric family. Niles, what are your initial non-spoilery thoughts on Saltburn?
You know, this is honestly a great way to kick off our third year, the 2024 season here, even though it was 2023 when this was released, because I think this is just a fantastic concept for a movie. I think it's just fascinating. You know, I watched this film probably 3 or 4 days ago, and I can't stop thinking about it. You know, it's kind of one of those films I think that kind of sticks with you for a while. I was really impressed by the performance by Barry in this movie too. I think he's just a phenomenal actor, and you know, I was reading a lot of articles on him as we were, you know, getting ready for this episode, and man, he really does lean into those creepy, weird roles.
Yeah.
And he somehow, like, always just excels at them. You know, I think he just does a really good job in these kinds of roles. He brings a lot of sympathy to it, and I really think that Saltburn, it's a great film to talk about this week, and I think it's just a great film for just about anyone to go and see and talk about, because I think there's a lot of different ways that you can approach discussions on this film, because it touches on a lot of different things. You know, it's kind of graphic. There's some sexuality themes. There's socialized norms, friendship, love, manipulation, social, class mobility. Like, there's so many different ways that you can approach a conversation about this movie, because I think that there's a lot of different themes at play. There's a lot going on here, even though it is kind of a simple story at the end of the day. It's just kind of about this guy and becoming friends with another guy and then interacting with his family. But yeah, I thought this was, I really am pleased with Saltburn, and, you know, without getting too much into spoilers, you know, within the first scene of the film, it kind of opens up with this kind of monologue where he's talking about his love for this other dude. And, you know, I went into this movie with didn't watch the trailer, had no preconceptions about what it was. So when I first saw that first few minutes, I was like, oh, is this kind of like a queer coming of age story or something like that? Which, you know, those are great films. But, you know, I was just surprised at the direction that this film took. I was not expecting what happened in this film. The twists were really great, and it really makes me want to rewatch it so I can pick up on all the subtle hints and the way that they kind of drip feed things out. But I'm also honestly surprised that the film is so polarizing too. You know, like when you even just like Google it, it says like 500 5-star reviews and then 500 1-star reviews, and it's like, what's going on here? What's something here that I'm not getting? I guess. But what about you, Dylan? What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I enjoyed this. I don't think I loved it, but I was thoroughly entertained throughout. And it was not at all what I was expecting. I will say what I was expecting in spoilers because I don't want to get too much into it, but it went in a lot of different directions than I was anticipating. And like you, I'm honestly a little bit confused by the discourse around this movie because there are people, and you mentioned from what you've seen, a lot of like older people are not really enjoying it, but even people on like film Twitter who are our age like fucking hate it.
Really?
And I don't really get that. But also so many people, like involved in the discourse were just talking about how like wild and crazy and out there and like how like beyond the pale this movie is. It's like, no, not really. There are a couple scenes that are kind of raunchy in their own way, but it's like some of y'all need to chill out a little bit or watch some more wild shit because this is, I don't know. It wasn't quite as insane as I was led to believe. But yeah, I thought the performances were great. Jacob Elordi, did he play Elvis in Priscilla? Hold on.
I don't know. I didn't see that one.
Let me see. Yes, he did. So that's the second movie I've seen him in this year. He's really good in this.
He was Felix,
I guess
right?
he was Felix, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I think all the performances were really good, like you mentioned, and the production's design, especially of Saltburn itself, which is a place, was really neat. And also the film was in, I guess, 4:3 aspect ratio, which was interesting. And when you watched it, was it like that for you too? Like it was the square and not the full TV?
I don't really remember. I feel like it was the full TV, but I don't know. I don't really fully recall. Was it just square for you, I guess? 4:3?
Yeah, it was just a square.
Okay.
And I'm not sure creatively like why the decision was made, but I kind of was like, oh, it takes place in 2006. I guess that's what TVs were shaped like then. Maybe it was just trying to get into the image of the era, or it was just being pretentious. Who knows?
Yeah, no, that's fair. Different time. You gotta fit the aesthetic if you can, and I think that definitely came through with some of the like costuming too. You know, it was like, oh yeah, I remember seeing people dressed like that in 2006. Like I think they did a good job there of like the different types of shirts and how they were styled. But yeah, it was. It is interesting to see kind of the discussion online and where people are griping about it, where people are really praising it. And I do agree with you. There's wilder shit out there than this, you know. Like there's movies that'll make you go, what the fuck? And you know, this movie, there's definitely scenes that make you go, what the fuck, but it's not every single scene.
Yeah, and the moments we'll talk about later on, but it's more like you watch it and you're just kind of like, ew, like don't do that. Don't do that. But yeah, I'm overall pretty positive on it. It was like it had this grime to it the entire time that I appreciated, and it just felt there's like a meanness in a lot of this movie that I think works really well for the story being told. But I enjoyed all the performances and the characters, and the relationship sort of evolving and unfolding in the way that they do. So yeah, light, no spoilers section, but I'm pretty positive on this. I enjoyed watching it. And I, like you, will probably want to watch it again.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we do spoilers?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's very positive on it as well. Yeah, let's dive in because I think that there's a lot to touch on in this movie, and this is not going to be a comprehensive discussion, but we'll do our best.
Yeah. All right. So spoilers. Right off the bat, I thought what this was, and I don't think I'd seen a trailer either. I'd just seen like clips on Twitter and images and stuff like that. What I thought this was going to be was one of those movies where someone is invited into the world of the rich and famous, and they get in there and it's really dark and fucked up and scary, and they sort of discover that all this whole world is really shallow and horrible, and they leave wanting nothing to do with it, or they're broken somehow. And there are elements of that here, but that's not really what this is. This was something else, almost like Oliver is like a toxic force in this, which is not something I expected. I also, leading up to the movie, thought Barry Cogan's character was the rich one who invited the friend over and not the other way around. So that was a smaller surprise. But yeah, I guess we should start by diving into the central relationship, unless you had anything you want to say on that.
No, I mean, I think I was different, than your initial thoughts, because I think kind of already mentioned it in the spoiler-free part of our discussion. But yeah, I thought just because that first scene, it's just like Barry's character, he's talking about Felix, and he's like, I loved him, and he's kind of having this internal debate that he's speaking out loud about it. And I think that scene is pretty important to the story as a whole. But just because of that initial scene, I thought, oh, this is going to be kind of a queer coming of age story, queer love story, that kind of thing. And I'm totally fine with that kind of direction of a story, as long as it's interesting and, original. And this definitely took an entirely different direction that I was expecting, because yeah, Oliver and Felix, they're the central piece of this movie.
Yeah.
They're, integral to it. Without the two of them, there is no movie, like in a word, it's all about them.
Well, and it does play on that too. Like, it never outright outlines that they are romantically interested in each other, or if they're just friends platonically. That's how they refer to each other. But they're very like touchy, and they like get very close to each other multiple times throughout the film. So it's always kind of like, are they into each other, or is this something else? And if they're into each other, what the fuck is up with all their other relationships going on?
Yeah,
because
there's
it's always a little bit vague about what's going on between the two of them, I think. Although there are definitely like homoerotic tendencies between the two of them, whether or not that's overtly sexual or not. I don't know.
I agree. Well, I think there's I think it's a little bit of a one-sided relationship in some respects, because I think that Oliver, at least from what's presented on screen, and I feel like it is kind of his POV for most of the movie, but filtered, is filtered POV. And he's definitely obsessed with Felix. And, we can talk about those two grotesque scenes to make it just clear how obsessed he was. The bathtub scene where he's...
Yeah.
It's gross, where he's just slipping down that gross runoff water, or the dirty water.
And what's in the water, more specifically.
Yes,
I think.
Yes, it's pretty disgusting. And then him later on fucking the dirt in the grave. It's like, yeah, he's pretty obsessed with this guy, and I think that Felix, at least from my perspective, it felt like he shared some of those feelings. Like, he sympathized with Oliver, and it was partly because of those lies that Oliver was telling him about his family. Like, oh, my mother's a drug addict,
right?
Or my parents were both drug addicts and they're both dead, and I'm an only child, kind of deal. And he's like, you're an inspiration, dude. And so I think he's kind of taking pity on him in some scenes. But I do think that over the course of their education, and then after that, they do develop this kind of bond, this relationship. But there is a point in the film where it switches, and all of a sudden Felix is just like, don't come near me. You make my blood run cold, kind of deal,
Right, and understandably so, I think.
Yes.
But it's but because like, and that ties into this next thing that I wanted to say. But like, by the end of the film, I almost wonder is it Felix himself that Oliver is obsessed with, or is it just what Felix represents? Because there is obviously some sexual interest there, at least from Oliver's side. And most of the film, he does seem infatuated with Felix himself, but his actions in the final act sort of confuse that. So, and you also have Oliver's dynamic with Venetia, the sister, who he hooks up with, even though she's on her period, which is another one of those ew moments.
Yes.
So it's like, what? And once you get sort of a clear picture of what he's doing, we'll talk about this more later, but it's like, what the fuck is he trying to accomplish with this relationship with Felix? Like, because if it doesn't seem romantic, because if it was romantic, he probably wouldn't be hooking up with the guy's sister, right? You would think. But is it sexual, or is it about the life that Felix is able to live and access to this world? And I think it might be a bit of both. But yeah. it's just vague enough to be like, what does he want out of this?
Exactly. And I think that vagueness is central to the film and the discussions people have about it, because I agree. It is kind of up for debate. Like, was this romantic? Was this platonic? Was it a mix of both? And like, is he are they more polyamorous? Are they like, are they just kind of like more monogamous? So like, what is this kind of situation between them? But I think there is a part of me that sympathizes with Oliver, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later too. But, I think that Oliver, at least at the start of the film, I think his intentions change over the film. That's my read on it. I think his intentions fluctuate throughout the film, because I think initially, and I could be totally wrong here, but I think initially Oliver was just looking for a friend.
Yeah.
I necessarily don't think that he knew that he wanted to manipulate Felix right when he got to Oxford. I don't think that he really premeditated everything that he did. Obviously, he did some with like popping the tire and everything, and forcing to have that situation where they bump into each other, kind of like a forced meet cute in a way.
Right. Yes.
But, I honestly kind of go back and forth on his intentions and where did things really start to change. Obviously he was intentional about worming his way into Felix's social circle and becoming his friend. But was it always a long con for him? Did he know who Felix was before he got to Oxford? Or was he just looking for a way to break into a new social circle and not fall into the same maybe social dynamics that he was used to from his previous schooling? And I think, there's like, because when he gets to Oxford, everyone's already starting to make friends and stuff, and they're talking, and he's struggling to meet people and have conversations, and the only person he starts to develop a bond with is the other super smart social outcast, and he's a total asshole, and, I think we've all kind of been in situations like that before, where you've entered new school environments, new classroom settings. Maybe you transfer to a new school, or you're in a different side of the school than your friends, and you got to make friends with new people. And maybe you're after like that first class or that first day, everything just kind of falls into place, and all of a sudden, the people in your social circle are there. And I feel like there are some instances, not every time, but you could be maybe a little unhappy about it, of like, I gotta be stuck with this guy for the semester. Oh man.
Yeah.
So
nope, definitely been there. And I agree. I think his like ambitions broaden and get more extreme as the film goes on. But I kind of, after we get the context of the flashbacks, I do kind of believe that there was always a social climber element to his intentions. Like, he wanted to. It seemed like he was vaguely aware of who Felix was, at least somehow, or at least recognized he was a person of status in this environment that he would want to be attached to in some capacity, right? And the film presents him at the beginning as being like very lower class and an underdog, and not really. He's an outsider to this environment, and I guess in fairness, like, even coming from the more, looks like, upper middle class background that he does, in an old money Oxford environment, that's still an outsider. Like,
yes,
if you're going to school with people who are like knighted, like the children of sirs, you're an outsider if you're not nobility. And it seems like Felix's family is nobility, and they have a manor estate and stuff like that.
Yeah. As close to nobility as you can get, yeah.
Yeah, and they do say in the movie that Richard E. Grant's character, the dad, is knighted. He is Sir something. But yeah, but like, what he initially wanted to do, is it just to get in a social circle, or is it to climb the ranks and achieve like new financial status or whatever? Who knows? Can't really tell.
It is confusing, because he's obviously incredibly smart and talented, and an intellectual. And then halfway through the film, we get to, or over halfway, we get to actually see his family. We get to meet his mom and dad. because they have this run in back of the house, and we realize, oh, his parents aren't addicts. He wasn't an only
Or
child.
dead.
He has two sisters,
Hmm.
and it's like his parents seem so well adjusted and everything, and yeah, they're not like rich, but they're well off. You know,
They're well off, yeah.
they're upper middle class, whatever. And
Hmm.
so I think it does kind of beg the question, like, why did he want to get out so badly? Why did he, like, of course, yeah, you go to Oxford, you're going to be very separated from your family, but it's
Hmm.
just like, it feels, I don't know. There's a part of me that wishes we got a little bit more context there of like why
Yeah.
he left and why he
Hmm.
didn't want to like go back there. But I guess there's kind of a self-answering question to a degree. You know, if you could have more, you could have more money, you could have a bigger place to live. Why not? You know, why would you not want to go out and pursue that? But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all
Well, and
speculation.
I feel like he's an addict. And he's an addict to manipulation and dishonesty because we find out in that same scene that he lies to them too. Like he told them what he's on like the rowing team or number one in the class and stuff like
Right.
that. So it's like, and Felix is just sitting there like, what the fuck is going on? Like
Yeah.
realizing that literally everything he knew about this guy was a lie, and that the guy lies to his parents too. So I think I don't know if he ever wanted to go home or not, but I think it is just like he's addicted to the con or just conning people. Because with the context of the flashbacks, like everything he does is manipulation and dishonesty,
Yeah.
like to an absurd degree.
Yeah,
So,
seriously. Well, and I remember seeing like a quote online that kind of did stick with me, where it was like, it made the observation that this movie isn't about class or social status; it's about envy, and I think
mhm.
kind of speaks to what we're circling around right here is that he was envious of these other lives. And he
Yeah,
is kind of, I think you're right, that there was kind of this long con element. He's addicted to wanting more and pursuing
mhm.
more. And maybe
Yeah,
that's what kind of gives him this drive to keep going and going and going.
yeah. And desire was another thing I've seen said about it. It's about the sort of fallout of unhealthy amounts of desire and like lust in various different forms.
Yeah,
I think,
I see
and
that.
that transitions us to like talking about Oliver himself and his role as the protagonist and antagonist. Which I will that I don't think he's the antagonist, but he is something in addition to being protagonist. We'll talk about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'll start it off because yeah, I think yeah, was he the protagonist and the antagonist simultaneously? And I think yes, he is. Um, and what I when I thought of this question, I was kind of circling around the class elements a little bit because I think on this podcast, if you're a fan or if you're a new listener, welcome. We love all of you. Thanks for coming back and
Hello.
listening. Hello. But on this podcast, in case you haven't kind of noticed already, we do kind of lean a little bit more towards the left, I would say, and we can be vocal about our beliefs. I think Dylan a little bit more so than me, but that's neither here
Yep.
nor there. But you know, I think that you and I are in agreement, Dylan, that billionaires should not exist. You don't need hundreds of millions of dollars in this lifetime. Like, you just
Nope.
don't, especially when there is such a significant disparity throughout the world in terms of like wealth, just food, housing, like access to resources in general. Like, there's so many people who need who need money more than you do, you know?
Yeah.
And I do love a good fuck the rich movie or series. You know, we talked about The Menu before. We've talked about Squid Game before on this
Yep.
podcast. So I'd encourage people to go listen to those if you
And
haven't done so
Glass
already.
Onion is another
Yes.
sort of good
Glass Onion
version
too.
of that.
I forgot about that one.
And Knives Out, but we didn't talk about Knives Out.
Yeah. But yeah, we do love saying fuck the rich on this podcast. Fuck the rich. And, you know, in Saltburn, there is class as its main element here, and you know, status and wealth. You know, when you have such an excessive amount of wealth, it's kind of disgusting to me. And in Saltburn, Oliver, I think, is given such. He is a protagonist. Obviously, he's given a lot of screen time, but I think a lot of it is very sympathetic to him, especially the intro. Like the first part of this movie is very sympathetic
Yeah.
to him. It presents him as kind of this. You know, up and
Underdog.
comer, pulling him up by his bootstraps, this social smart outcast, and his only friend at the school, we already talked about it, is the other smart social outcast. And I think we're definitely meant to root for him because of that. Like, it builds him up in this way. But then by the end of the movie, he's climbed the Catton ranks. This rich family, he's kind of climbed through. They've all died off. He's killed them off, to inherit the property and assumingly the money too. So for me, it's kind of, I think by the end of the film, he does become the antagonist because he's literally killing the rich people, taking them away.
Yeah.
And I feel conflicted about his character and him as a protagonist because he's obviously a terrible person. On the one hand, he's very clever and he's able to manipulate the family and get what he wants. And on the other hand, I'm really glad to see those rich assholes lose their status and die and lose their wealth. They didn't need to hoard all that wealth. But now he's just going to hoard it at the same time.
Yeah, he's just going to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's not like
he's not some vanguard of the Marxist revolution or something. He just wants more shit.
Exactly.
But the only reason I disagreed and get the protagonist antagonist thing, I think he is the protagonist for sure, and I think he is the villain. But where I pushed back a little bit is like the protagonist and the antagonist are structural bits of the story, and the antagonist is the one in opposition to the protagonist's goal. And I don't think he fulfills... I think there are stories where a character can be both, like getting in their own way, or their own faults, or keeping them from achieving what they want, but I don't think that's the case here. But I do think by the end, he is a pretty villainous force. And we'll talk about a critique of this movie is that it does class critique poorly. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. And I do agree a little bit, but I also don't think that's entirely what the movie is trying to do. It's more about his relationship to this class divide and this specific family than anything else.
Yeah.
And like the parents are horrible in their own specific ways, but it's like Felix is never presented as deserving of any like malice in this way. Like he may be sort of shallow and just like using the people around him to fulfill, friendship roles, and we'll talk about that later on as well. But it's like he doesn't do anything bad, and he does seem to like genuinely care about the people in his orbit, which is unique amongst his family, I would say. I think there is a difference in how he and his sister are portrayed versus how their parents are portrayed.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I do definitely agree that Oliver is filling multiple roles in the story, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And I think you're kind of right there that the antagonist is supposed to serve, on the other side of the coin to a protagonist. And I think for a lot of this movie, that's kind of the Farley character. Like he's kind of
definitely an antagonist.
Yeah, he's got that counterpart role to Oliver, and I think it's kind of game recognizing game. It's like I see you from a mile away. I know what you're doing. You're trying to weasel your way into this family, and I'm not going to let you do it because that's my spot, kind of deal. It's like I got to get him out of here. And even like they were both going to the same tutor at Oxford. Like that was kind of their first scene together. Is they were both going to read their essay to the tutor, and they were going to be there paired together all year. And it's like, if that's not a direct comparison between the two, I don't know what is.
Yeah, Farley is definitely the antagonist, and I think his role, like you called out, is interesting because he is also trying to sort of benefit from his relationship to this family, but he is actually a part of the family. And it seems like he is being done wrong, or his mom is being done wrong by the family by not being given enough to get by. And we're not given full details on what her circumstances are, but it's like it does seem like she is struggling, and they can help, and they are choosing not to. For
seriously.
Whatever reason. And you're right. He is the antagonist of the film, I think, the whole way through. But and the reason the distinction between hero and villain and protagonist and antagonist is important for stories more broadly is like the protagonist can be the villain and the antagonist can be the hero. Avengers Infinity War is this. Thanos is the protagonist of that movie. He is the character we follow through the whole thing, but the Avengers are the heroes, even though they are structurally the antagonists of Infinity War. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, he does fill these multiple roles, and it is just fascinating to see him kind of lie and manipulate his way into getting this privileged status. And, I love that final scene when he's just dancing around the house, just naked to that song.
Party on the Dance Floor has been stuck in my head all day.
It is such a killer.
Or Murder on the Dance Floor, sorry.
Yeah, Murder on the Dance Floor. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's excellent.
Yeah, and just speaking of villainy and symbolism, like the party sequence even has Felix wearing angel wings as his costume, while Oliver has horns, antlers, but still on his head. It's like, it's not attempting subtlety here. Like,
yeah, it's pretty on the nose there.
He's meant to be a malevolent force who has entered this environment and is causing chaos. And he does that to a shockingly successful degree.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And at that party too, I can't remember everyone else, but I remember that Farley was dressed as a horse. I don't know what kind of symbolism you want to get out from there, but I felt just kind of
maybe the Trojan horse.
I could see that, or just like his horse is in for the long haul, like he's been racing this whole time. But also, like it's a guy in a horse costume, so I'm like, it's just an impersonator. I don't know. We don't need to read into it too much.
Well, I did enjoy their interaction at the party because when Oliver's like, they'll be mad when they see you, right? And he's like, no, they invited me. Like, you really don't get it, do you? Like, this is my house. I live here. Like, they're not actually going to get rid of me.
Yeah, right.
It was like kind of a wake-up call for Oliver at that moment, I think. And he realized he had to get rid of him, Farley, in a more permanent way if he wanted to get what he wanted out of this situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he didn't have much say over that. But yeah, that was an interesting scene, too, because, I think the last scene that the two of them had before Farley got kicked out was when he just kind of like stuck into his bedroom and, jerked him off, basically.
Yeah.
And it's like their dynamic didn't really change after that, It was kind of like, I think he was trying to establish power over Farley, but then Farley's not really intimidated the next time he sees him. He's like, no, I'm still here. You're not gone.
Well, he got kicked out, remember? I think he planted something in Farley's room, and that was his first attempt to remove him from the equation. Like, he's trying to take Farley's place in that moment,
that makes more
sense.
And thank you.
And then at the party, when they meet back up, he realizes that it didn't work because Farley is like actually family to these people, and they're not going to get him out on this. So he gets him blamed for Felix's death later on.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, you want to dive into some of the critiques you've seen about the film and whether or not we agree with them?
So I mean, like we talked about earlier, we've seen some. It's polarizing online. I feel like you either kind of love it or you hate it. Maybe you're in the middle. Who knows? Like, I think I really do like this. I don't know if I'll say I love it 100%.
Yeah,
but
I think I'm in the middle as well, but positive. Yeah.
Like, I thought it's really good, but some of the critiques I saw, like, because I was just curious, I wanted to do some digging and see what people didn't like about it. And one of the things that popped up more frequently than not was poor social commentary. Basically, this is the super rich elite people are presented as, actually good or okay or decent or, just kind of like nice and kind, while the middle class social climber is kind of a dangerous menace. It's kind of that was kind of a message that people pulled out of this movie. And, it's kind of weird for them, because I see what they're trying to say with this critique of it. Like, yes, it's not like the most eloquent social commentary about social mobility.
Yeah, but I don't even fully agree with this critique, at least when it comes to the parents, Richard E. Grant and Rosamund Pike, because they're pretty horrible, like, the entire time, especially in the way they treat Pamela and how they react to her death. It's like, oh, she'll do anything for attention. It's like, she died partially because you sent her away. Like, it's it's like they're horrible, but in a very passive aggressive, conflict avoidant sort of way. You know,
Yes.
like, oh, you can stay as long as you want. It's like, oh, you have an apartment you can go to. You should definitely go. Like, we wouldn't want you to stay here if you have
Yeah.
there to go. And it's like
Right.
they're truly terrible.
Well, yeah, and there was that one scene too where they find Felix's body, and they're like talking about it for a second, and then like the mom's like, "Oh, well, it's almost lunch," and then Dad's like, "Oh yeah, that's right." And they just get up and go to lunch. They just
Well,
leave.
I think that's them. They're in shock. I think that's what
they're
that
they're
is.
in shock. Yeah, but yeah,
they're in shock, and they're refusing to reckon with the reality of what just happened.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get upset at them for that, because they're like how the fuck do you react to that? I don't know, because remember he's trying to just like wake him up. He's trying to wake him up, or like he's cold, so he's trying to warm him up too. It's like it's pretty sad to watch.
It is very sad, but I'm like, if it was me in the moment, I would say, fuck lunch. I'm not going to lunch. I'm dealing with this. Like, I can't focus on anything else but this. But again, it's my perspective. So it's definitely different for them.
Yeah. But I will say though, like, if the film's main goal was a critique of the upper class and like wealth disparity and stuff like that, I agree. It didn't do a great job at speaking on those themes. And I would say, like if the film was trying to be Parasite, it failed. And Parasite does a really great job, because when that movie first came out, there were a lot of people who were like, well, but the like rich family was nice, and like they didn't deserve what happened to them and all that stuff. It's like, no, you don't get it. Their existence alone, the fact that they have the wealth they have, means they are parasites on society. That's the point. It's like, it doesn't matter that they're nice. What matters is that they are leeching off of everyone around them. And that movie does that very well. That's a good critique, and it's well executed.
It is.
This movie, I don't think, is about that.
I agree. I think that this movie is a little bit more focused on like the toxicity of love and obsession, of your own ambition and envy. I think that's kind of really where its message lies, in the emotional component of humanity. And when you're in relationships, whether it's platonic or romantic or one-sided, I think that there's a lot of manipulating factors at play that will do things that'll make you do crazy things too.
Yeah, it like leaves you more vulnerable to your base instincts, which might cause horrible things to happen. But yeah,
I agree.
More critiques.
Yes, another critique that I saw online was that at the end, there's we get a bunch of flashbacks in quick succession about Oliver and all the kind of traps or not traps, but like actions he took to jumpstart these situations, like putting the pin in Felix's bike tire, so that way they have the meet cute, or him like putting the razor blades by the bathroom, or there was a few other ones that I'm blanking on right now, but there's a lot of flashbacks there. And I think the critique there online was that it feels like that the movie's trying to baby the audience a little bit too much, and say like, oh, he's a mastermind who premeditated everything. But, there's just so many things that like he couldn't have planned for. And like we kind of already talked about, I think that there is a moment, it is kind of at that party, or after Felix realizes that he's lying about his whole life, that it just kind of, the switch flips in, and he's like, now I need to get rid of Felix. That's the only way I can kind of stay here and keep up this momentum that I've built,
Yeah. I didn't mind the flashbacks, honestly. I don't really agree with that critique either. But and also, was it telling us that he killed Venetia, or he just left the tool for her to kill herself in proximity, assuming she would do it?
That's the thing that I was talking with my partner a little bit about too. I think it's just implied that he had something to do with her death. I don't think that necessarily he killed her, but I think he kind of gave her the tools.
He pushed her over the edge, I guess. Yeah.
Not sure there. But and then another critique I saw was just that there's too much shock value with some of those more grotesque and graphic scenes. Yeah, when you first see them, they're kind of uncomfortable, but it's not like, God, what is that? I think it's like Hereditary or something like that, where just like someone's head gets cut off and it lingers on it for like 10 seconds or something like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, that is a lot of shock value. But this, it's whatever. Like, just
Yeah,
grow
I
some
mean,
balls.
it plays into the vibe of the movie and our perception of this character. I think I don't know. It's fine.
I know. Just I think also there's like something here too of like a couple different audiences and age ranges, like demographics. Like I think that Gen Z and millennials, we really like this movie. I think there's a lot of people within our generations that think this is a great movie. But then if you show this to your boomer uncle at Christmas, yeah, he might not like it a lot.
There was someone on Twitter, and I don't remember their name, but they posted. They're like, I suggested Saltburn for the family Christmas movie, and we got halfway through, and they told me to go take a walk, and turned it off. and then they showed a text from their mom, and it's like, when you get back, you owe everyone an apology.
Jeez, I didn't like it.
No, and like I suggested Babylon for the Christmas Day family movie last year. That movie has like a 35-minute cocaine orgy dance party at the start. Probably not the most wholesome family Christmas movie. I didn't know. It's not my fault.
That's okay.
So I've been there. I've done a similar thing. But
yeah.
And then another critique here is that nothing happens in the first half of the movie. No, that's wrong.
I know.
That's
like,
just not true at all.
I think it's like a smaller portion of just like people I saw on Reddit just being like, there's nothing really happens. It's like, dude, there was so much character development, so much growth. Like, yeah, maybe it's a little slow at points, but it all works well.
Foundation.
Together.
It's building character dynamics and motivations for the whole rest of the film. But I want to go back to our two main people at this point and talk about what they're thinking. So we'll start with Felix. What do we think Felix wanted out of all of this? Because on the surface, he seems pretty genuine, but we always get those comments from like Venetia and Farley and maybe some other characters about how it's like, oh yeah, last year's one was like whatever. Or it's like it seems like he always has like a person that he brings or that he's latched onto for a sort of time. So it's like, is he sort of like using people to fulfill a social role in his life, or does he actually care and he's just being misperceived? So what's his whole deal? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think out of everyone in his family, between Venetia and his parents, and even Farley off in the distance, that Felix was probably the most well-intentioned person in this movie. That's just me. I feel like he did have some negative personality traits, like he was a little bit selfish at times, and I feel like he was kind of very obsessed with like partying and getting with women. And man, that one scene too that was so funny, where like they were at the party too. I'm just going off on a tangent.
Oh yeah, that was so funny.
Yeah, they're at the party, and this guy is just like, he's like talking to this girl for 3 hours or something like that, and then Felix just stands up, points at her, and they walk out together. And it's like, like wow, that's some, as the kids say, riz. I think
riz.
But getting back on topic, I think that he did kind of have these negative traits, but I think as a whole, I did believe he was genuine, and that he was looking out for his own best interests, but also the best interests of others. I think he also just wanted to have a good time. That was the vibe I was getting from all the partying and drinking and drugs and everything. It was just like, I think he just wants to hang out and, shoot the shit and just have fun with others. But, I honestly
never,
don't
like,
think that there were... Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You finished.
I was just going to say, I don't think that there were many malicious thoughts going on under the surface. But what were you going to say?
Yeah, because he never, like, speaks ill of Oliver behind his back, right? We get access to conversations that Oliver wasn't meant to hear. He does, but he's not meant to. And it's like Felix is always kind of like sticking up for him against the other shitty people at the school who are looking down on him. But yeah, and I don't even feel like when he takes him to his mom's house at the end, I don't think he was like trying to do anything like weird with that, right? It seemed like he was genuinely like, hey, this is important. It's your birthday. You should patch shit up with your mom. And then he gets there and he's like, what the fuck? What?
Yeah, right.
And then things change there because, and I don't even feel like his outrage at Oliver and not wanting to be around him is misplaced. Like, if I found out someone had been lying to me to that degree for the entire time I'd known them, like, yeah, get the fuck away from me. That's weird, man. That's really gross.
Yeah, friendship over.
Yeah.
But I agree. Yeah, I mean, the fact that he took him to his parents' place, it's like, I think that just shows you that, yeah, he was a good guy at the end of the day. And kind of circling back to his family, you know, I think that his parents are a little shallow and vapid, and, you know, they're not very good people. They're fine, they're kind, but, you know, they're not great. And his sister is kind of a meandering lost soul who's not really doing much, I would say. I can't remember much about her character at this point, but to me it feels like out of those four, one of them was good. And I think if you're playing a percentage game, you know, it's like, yeah, every rich person is not going to be great. You know, you just look at Succession and you'll see it. You know, all those people are terrible, but then there's going to be kind of one person in there who, you know, does have good intentions, who is kind of a good person. And it's not just like the curse of money or the curse of wealth is always going to infect and seep in and corrupt you. It could happen, but I think that sometimes Felix is kind of this small exception, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like, the only time he does something, like, truly, like, not even shitty, just, like, a little bit weird is when Oliver, like, pushes him to clean up his room, and then he just cuts him out socially for a little while. It's like, that was a little aggressive, I suppose, but he's, and maybe it's because the film is told from Oliver's perspective, and he's kind of obsessive about this guy, so he's being portrayed very well, but yeah, he doesn't seem like a bad dude. His parents are, like, kind if it's convenient for them, but as soon as it becomes, like, a bother, they're not very nice. But yeah, and then let's talk about Oliver's intention here, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but, like, it doesn't feel like his intention was always to kill everybody. It seems like he kind of pivots to that once Felix discovers his deception and that he's going to, like, get cast out of this life that he's become accustomed to over the months the film takes place over. So, like, my question is, did he initially, like, mainly want to be friends or sexual partners with Felix and just decided to torch everything once he realized that was no longer going to happen? Or did he always have this more status and asset, like, goal in mind, do you think?
Yeah, I think that is the question at the heart of this movie, because it's incredibly difficult to answer. Because I do feel conflicted again. I feel the sympathy for his character being a social outcast. Not saying I ever was one, but, you know, I feel like you can always sympathize with a social outcast. And, you know, when he's trying to get some kind of social mobility going, it's like, can you really blame him for trying? But at the same time, it's like, yeah, did he have his targets set on Felix from the get-go? Because, yeah, that first scene where he's looking out the window at Felix, and then he thinks maybe he looks at him, he darts away from the window, and maybe that's just because he doesn't want to appear awkward, but it could also be because, oh, I know that guy. I'm ready. He's my target, and I'm going for it. So I'm not sure, but I do think that there is some like primordial love, so, you know, like this obsession that he develops, and it's kind of this toxic envy, this toxic love for Felix and for the concept of, like, of Felix's social status and who he is as a person. So it is tough for me to say. What about you? What are your thoughts on Oliver's intentions?
Yeah, I think there was always the element of getting himself into a new social circumstance, but I did think that there was at least, I don't want to call it love, but obsession is the great word, and desire. Obsession, desire for Felix specifically. And I think over the course of the movie, he comes to like this world he's found himself in, and then when it's all about to be taken away, he wants to prevent that from happening. And he is ultimately comfortable sacrificing Felix to make sure that he gets to stay in this paradise, I guess, that he's found himself in. But I don't know. It did feel to me like there was a pivot in his intentions after the scene with his parents. So
I think so too.
But
yeah, I do think that there was a part of him that always kind of wanted some kind of love and affection, mainly because there was in that scene where he kills the mom, like, and he's on top of her body, kind of hugging her. It's kind of a small visual thing where he's trying to put her arm around him, and it keeps falling off, and he puts it back, and it falls off, and it's like, that's kind of funny. But I think it kind of speaks to a deeper desire within his character to have some kind of source of affection. But at the same time, he's got his parents, so I don't know.
Yeah.
How much affection do you need, kid?
Yeah. Like, embrace the affection you have already. That seems perfectly healthy, but I don't know. Weird guy. Not a cool guy. Not a fan.
Bad vibes.
Yeah, very much bad vibes. Any closing thoughts, or should we move on to?
No, I would just say I'd recommend it if you haven't seen it. But if you're this far in, I hope you've seen it.
Yeah, I thought it was neat. I'd recommend it as well. Let's hop into some other stuff, just stuff we've been watching, reading, playing, doing whatever. Niles, what have you been up to recently?
Since it's been a few weeks since our last episode, I've actually watched a few things over the holiday break. Got some good holiday time in with some of the classics like How the Grinch Stole Christmas. We've actually done an episode before on some of our favorite Christmas and holiday media. So if you're a Christmas fan or you're looking for something for next year, planning ahead, go check that out. But
we should have plugged that last episode. We forgot.
I know. What are we doing? But that's always just a classic comedy to watch. I love that one. Jim Carrey's great in that film. And for the first time, I actually watched The Holiday. Rom-com around the holidays as well, with Jack Black, Cameron Diaz, Jude Law, and
Kate Winslet.
Yeah, that's the one. It was very fun, actually. I really enjoyed it. I was like, I don't want to watch a rom-com, and then I'm 30 minutes in, I'm like, oh, this is great. I love this.
It's fun. Very cozy. It's a very cozy movie.
It is cool, and I just love the concept. Yeah, just trading places with someone. Back in the day, that was what a revolutionary idea back in 2006. And more recently, way back in time, went back to Ice Age. Rewatched Ice Age, the old, I think it was 2002 animation.
Something like that. Yeah, it's old as hell. Great movie. I love Ice Age.
It's great. A lot of it does hold up, I would say. Animation of the humans, not so much, but the rest of it looks all right. And it's perfect for the kids' movie and what it needed to be at the time. And some of those jokes still do land.
Cool.
But there was a small part of me where we're like watching the movie. I'm like, dodos didn't exist at the time, and I Googled it. I kept fact checking, like, when did these animals exist, like kind of stuff. But yeah, fun movie, good time. And RuPaul's Drag Race season 16 has aired at the start of this year. They always come out in January, which is a very interesting time to start it again. But it's interesting start to the season. Got a whole new cast of queens. Only met 7 of them so far. So far, I'm liking Q a lot. And what's her name? Dawn. Dawn's just the weird queen of the season, and I can't wait to see what she does. Anyways, and the only other show that I've really been watching, or I finished recently, was What If Season 2 on Netflix for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I liked it. I liked it overall. There was one episode that I really hated, but the rest of them I really liked. So
okay,
yeah,
I'll get to that eventually.
You got time.
Yeah.
But yeah, what about you, Dylan? What have you been up to lately?
So a bunch of sort of continuing on from what I've been doing. So still reading Cryptonomicon. Started rewatching The Boys. I introduced it to my mom, and I'm like, I'm just gonna keep watching this and watch it all the way through and prep for season 4, I guess.
Nice.
And continuing to play Jedi Survivor and a second Baldur's Gate playthrough, and then For All Mankind, Monarch Legacy of Monsters. Those each have 1 episode left, and they've both been fun. For All Mankind, I like a lot. Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, I enjoy, but it's not like the best thing ever. And then I watched Poor Things with Emma Stone, which was fantastic. Great film. I also watched Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. Not a very great film. Unfortunately, I was rooting for it. I wanted to see what he put together, and apparently I think part of the problem is they artificially wanted to recreate the conditions that led to the Snyder Cut. There is a longer version of the movie coming out to Netflix, but it's maybe you should have just put that movie out, because there are a lot of gaps in the movie that you released, and it's so baffling. Maybe we'll do an episode on it if you want to watch it, but
sure.
It's
that could be good.
It's the whole crux of the movie is basically ripping on Magnificent Seven. And we got to get all these people together to go defend our town. And then, so the whole movie is just going from location to location to get the next guy. They get the guy or gal, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. They have their little section of the movie where they do stuff, and it's about them. And then they are just in the background the rest of the movie. They don't do anything. They just stand there and are not developed as characters. They don't interact with any other characters in any meaningful way. It's fucking baffling.
They just stand there looking menacingly.
Yeah, I really wanted to like it. Great cast. But I don't know. Snyder's visuals are always pretty distinctive too, and they weren't really in this. There's nothing really visually that stood out to me in the whole movie, but maybe when there's a dead week or something, we can talk about it. But I saw Wonka as well, which was surprisingly delightful. I liked it a lot. It was very fun.
Oh.
Timothée Chalamet did a great job, and it was a whimsical little musical movie, and I had fun. And I also watched the entirety of Only Murders in the Building, which was a very fun show. And now I'm sad that I watched it all, because there isn't any more for me to watch, and I always hate that feeling. But it's it's really fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it last time. I guess I didn't, but yeah, we also finished Succession as well, finally. And I feel ya on that with Only Murders in the Building. It's once it's gone, it's well, what am I going to fill my time with now? Yeah. I gotta find a new obsession.
I know. Well, what I was thinking about with that, because when you get to the end of a show, the story ends. There's closure, and it's oh, okay, time to say goodbye. But it's fuck, I'm on a cliffhanger. There was a cliffhanger. I have to wait. How long?
I know, right?
It's because I talk about this all the time, right? I love when things end. When the story is done and you end it, I respect that, and I like that a lot. But when you're when the story is not done and you still have nothing more to watch, it hurts you and it makes you sad.
I know. I need more Invincible. It needs to come back already.
I know.
Come back. I need to know where
it was
go.
Just getting started and then it went away again.
Not today. No.
Yeah. No. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks for, I think, The Boy and the Heron. And then we'll figure it out from there. But until that point in time, Niles, where can people find you on the internet?
You can follow me on Instagram at NilesGotNoStyles. Dylan, what about you? Where can people follow you online?
On Instagram at DylanD1026, on Twitter at DDayMovies, on YouTube at DDayMovies, on Twitch, I forgot about it, DDay_movies. You can find both of us at Play Pause Rewind on your podcast platform of choice and on YouTube, as well as our second channel, Play Pause Rewind Videos, where non-spoiler sections and shorts and our Rewind series all appear. And, we're on TikTok as well. Play Pause Rewind podcast _podcast, I think is what it is. So if you like this, please give us a 5-star review, share it with your friends and family. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, and maybe check out some of our older episodes. We got a lot of them now. We're chugging along, and we'll be back for Boy and the Heron soon. Great movie. I've seen it already. Sorry, spoilers for the episode, but
gosh,
right.
I got to catch up. But thank you all for listening. Much appreciated, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Goodbye.
Bye.